The town of Greystone was a place of wealth and influence, where powerful men controlled everything from business to politics. Among them was Mr. Leonard Parker, a respected millionaire known for his generosity and success. He owned the largest hotel in the city, donated to charity, and even sponsored young boys from poor backgrounds to get an education. Hello, family. Welcome to Storytime Mutually. Please subscribe to my YouTube channel, like and share this video to your friends and loved ones, and don't forget to turn on post notifications for more videos. Sit back, relax as we dive into the story. People admired him. They saw a man who had worked his way up from nothing and built an empire. His face was always on the news, shaking hands with politicians, attending charity events, and giving speeches about helping the less privileged. To the world, he was a role model. But behind closed doors, Leonard Parker was a different man. He had dark secrets, ones he hid so well that even those closest to him never suspected a thing. His so-called scholarship program was just a front. While some children genuinely got help, there were others, young boys who never spoke, who carried sadness in their eyes, and who disappeared from the public after a while. It wasn't something anyone noticed at first. The boys who went missing were orphans or from struggling families. No one asked too many questions because Leonard always had a reason they got adopted. They traveled abroad for better education. They moved away with distant relatives. And people believed him. After all, why would a man who gave so much to the community be involved in anything sinister? But in the shadows, the truth was far from what people saw. Leonard had built his empire on manipulation. He knew how to act like the perfect man. He dressed well, spoke with wisdom, and carried himself like a father to the fatherless. When he took boys into his mansion, he made them feel special. At first, he gave them new clothes, good food, and a comfortable life. But as time passed, the kindness turned into something else. The boys who tried to speak out were silenced. Some were threatened, while others were sent away, never to be seen again. Leonard knew how to erase traces, how to ensure no one could point fingers at him. His money and influence kept him untouchable. For years, this continued. And for years, no one knew. Until one day, one boy changed everything. His name was Kevin Adams. He was 14, sharp-minded, and more observant than most. When Leonard's men found him on the streets, homeless and starving, they took him to the mansion, promising him a new life. Kevin was grateful, at first. He saw the grand halls, the golden chandeliers, and the beautiful gardens. Everything seemed perfect. But as weeks passed, Kevin started noticing things. Some boys whispered at night, their voices trembling. Others looked broken, as if they carried a pain too deep to explain. And there were the disappearances, boys who were there one day and gone the next. Kevin was different from the others. He had been on the streets long enough to know when something wasn't right. He watched Leonard closely, listening to his words, observing his movements. And then, one night, something happened, something that made Kevin decide he had to escape, no matter what. But escaping wasn't going to be easy, because Leonard Parker had eyes everywhere. Kevin lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling of his lavish room in Greystone Mansion. The silk sheets felt soft against his skin. The air smelled of expensive cologne, and the glow of the chandelier above cast golden patterns on the walls. To anyone else, this was a dream come true. A homeless boy taken off the streets and given a life of comfort. But Kevin knew better. He had seen the fear in the eyes of the other boys. He had noticed how some of them flinched when Leonard Parker walked into a room. He had counted how many boys were in the mansion a week ago, and how 2 had suddenly disappeared without a word. Something was wrong, and he needed to get out. But escaping wasn't going to be easy. Leonard had guards, cameras, and high walls surrounding the estate. The gates were locked at night, and only a few trusted workers had the keys. And worst of all, Leonard was careful. He never left any evidence of wrongdoing. If Kevin made a mistake, he wouldn't just fail. He would vanish like the others. He needed a plan. The next morning, Kevin acted as if nothing was wrong. He smiled when Leonard spoke to him, nodded obediently, and even laughed when the millionaire made one of his usual fake fatherly jokes. If Leonard suspected he was planning something, Kevin knew he wouldn't survive another night. During breakfast, Kevin listened carefully to the guards' conversations. They spoke about their routines, when the gates were open for deliveries, and which areas had blind spots in the security cameras. It wasn't much, but it was enough to start forming a plan. That night, when the mansion grew silent, Kevin made his move. He crept out of his room, his heart pounding. He had memorized the route. The kitchen's back door led to the gardens, and from there, he could climb the fence near the servants' quarters. He had seen a crack in the wall, a small enough opening that he could squeeze through. But just as he reached the door, a hand grabbed his shoulder. Kevin froze. Slowly, he turned around. It was Mr. Leonard Parker himself. The millionaire stood there in his silk robe, smiling like a man who had caught a child sneaking candy. His grip tightened on Kevin's shoulder. "Where are you going, son?" Leonard asked, his voice calm but cold. Kevin swallowed hard. His mind raced for an excuse. I couldn't sleep," he said. "I just wanted some fresh air." Leonard studied him for a moment. Then, to Kevin's surprise, he chuckled and patted his cheek. Fresh air," Leonard said. "I understand. But you don't need to wander around at night. The world outside this mansion is dangerous, Kevin. You're safe here with me." Kevin forced a smile and nodded. But deep inside, fear twisted in his stomach. Leonard knew. He knew Kevin was trying to escape. And now, Kevin was in even greater danger. The next day, Kevin noticed a change. The mansion's security doubled overnight. Guards patrolled the hallways, and the back door he had tried to use was now locked. Cameras had been adjusted, watching every entrance and exit. Kevin wasn't just trapped, he was being watched. And Leonard? He continued acting as if nothing had happened. He still gave speeches about kindness, still played the role of a generous father figure. But Kevin could feel the difference. The smiles were emptier. The grip on his shoulder was firmer. The way Leonard looked at him, it sent shivers down his spine. Kevin knew he had one last chance. If he failed again, he wouldn't just be locked in the mansion. He might never be seen again. Kevin spent the next 2 weeks pretending. He acted like he had learned his lesson. He laughed at Leonard's jokes, thanked him for his kindness, and obeyed every rule. Slowly, the security around him loosened. The guards stopped watching him so closely. The cameras were no longer pointing directly at his door. And that's when he made his move. Late one night, Kevin waited until everyone was asleep. This time, he didn't go through the kitchen or the gardens. He had discovered another way, a small vent in the laundry room that led to the outer walls. It was narrow, but Kevin was small enough to squeeze through. With careful movements, he crawled through the dark, dust-filled space, his heart pounding. Every sound made him freeze, afraid that at any moment, someone would hear him. Finally, after what felt like hours, he reached the end of the vent. He pushed the cover open and found himself outside the mansion walls. The air was cool against his face. Freedom. But just as he stepped forward, a flashlight beam hit his face. "Hey! Stop right there!" A guard had spotted him. Kevin ran. The guard shouted, and within seconds, more men were running after him. Kevin's feet pounded against the ground as he dashed through the bushes, ignoring the branches scratching his skin. He had one chance. If they caught him, it was over. In the distance, he saw a road. Cars were passing by. If he could just get there, someone might help him. But the guards were faster. Just as he reached the edge of the road, a strong arm grabbed him from behind. Kevin screamed, struggling with all his strength. "No!" he shouted. "Help me! Somebody help!" A van pulled up. The door slid open. Kevin kicked, punched, did everything he could, but the guards overpowered him. And as they shoved him inside, he realized he had lost. He was going back to the mansion. Back to Leonard Parker. And this time, there would be no second chance. Kevin sat in the darkness of the van, his heart pounding so hard it felt like it would break his ribs. The guard sat beside him, their strong hands gripping his arms, making it clear that escape was no longer an option. The ride back to Greystone Mansion felt like a lifetime. The van moved smoothly over the road, the hum of the tires mixing with Kevin's own shaky breaths. His mind raced with fear. He had failed. He had tried to run, and now he was caught. What would Leonard do to him? Would he disappear like the other boys? As the van pulled up to the mansion's gates, Kevin felt his stomach tighten. The doors opened, and he was dragged out. The guards didn't speak. They simply marched him through the grand entrance, past the shining chandeliers and polished floors, and into a small, cold room at the back of the house. Then they left him there. Kevin sat on the floor, his arms wrapped around his knees, his body trembling. He didn't know how much time had passed before the door creaked open again. Leonard Parker walked in. His silk robe flowed as he stepped inside, his face calm but unreadable. He looked at Kevin for a long time, his dark eyes studying him like a father would study a misbehaving child. Then he sighed and sat down on the chair across from Kevin. "I am very disappointed in you, Kevin," he said softly.
Kevin didn't speak.
He stared at the floor, his fists clenched. Leonard continued, his voice smooth. "You had everything here.
Food, clothes,
A future. And yet, you tried to leave." Kevin gritted his teeth. "I know what you do to the boys here." Leonard chuckled, shaking his head. "And what exactly do you think you know?" Kevin looked up, anger burning in his eyes. "I know about the boys who disappear. I know why they're afraid. I know what kind of man you are." Leonard's smile didn't fade. Instead, he leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "Let me tell you something about the world, Kevin. People believe what they want to believe. I am Leonard Parker, the great businessman, the generous millionaire, the hero of this town. Do you think anyone would believe the words of a homeless boy over mine?" Kevin felt his chest tighten. He knew Leonard was right. The man had money, power, and influence. No one would listen to a poor boy like him. But that didn't mean he was going to give up. Kevin took a deep breath. "Someone will find out one day. You can't hide forever." Leonard's smile faltered for the first time. For a brief moment, Kevin saw something in his eyes, fear. But it was gone as quickly as it appeared. Leonard stood up and dusted off his robe. "You need to learn your place, Kevin," he said. "And I'll make sure you do." With that, he walked out, locking the door behind him. Kevin was trapped. For days, Kevin was kept in the room. Food was brought to him, but no one spoke to him. He was watched at all times. The windows were locked. There was no way out. But Kevin refused to give up. He knew the mansion had workers, maids, cooks, gardeners. And he knew one of them had to have a heart. He just needed a way to get a message to the outside world. That opportunity came one morning when a young maid named Sarah brought his food. She was around 19, and unlike the others, she avoided looking at him. She placed the tray down and turned to leave, but Kevin spoke quickly. "Please," he whispered. "Help me." Sarah froze. Kevin could see the hesitation in her eyes. She was afraid. "They'll hurt me," he said, "like they hurt the others." Sarah glanced at the camera in the corner of the room, then at the door. Her hands trembled. She turned back to Kevin, her voice barely above a whisper. "I can't." Kevin's heart sank. But just as she reached the door, she paused. Then, without looking back, she whispered, "Write a note. I'll find a way." Then she was gone. Kevin's hope reignited. That night, he found a piece of paper in the drawer of the small table in his room. Using the tip of a fork, he scratched out a message. "Help. Leonard Parker is not who he says he is. Call the police." The next morning, when Sarah brought his food, she slid the tray toward him. As she turned to leave, Kevin quickly slipped the note under the plate. Their eyes met, for a second. Then she was gone. 2 days passed. Nothing happened. Kevin began to lose hope. Maybe Sarah had been too scared. Maybe she had thrown the note away. Maybe.
Boom.
The door burst open. A group of police officers stormed inside. "Kevin Adams?" one of them asked. Kevin scrambled to his feet. "Yes. Come with us." Kevin didn't hesitate. He ran forward, letting the officers guide him out of the mansion. As he stepped outside, the bright morning sun hit his face. He was free. In the distance, he saw police cars, flashing lights, and officers handcuffing Leonard Parker. The millionaire was shouting, his face twisted in rage. "You can't do this. Do you know who I am?" Leonard bellowed. "This is a mistake. But the officers ignore him. Sarah stood among the crowd, watching everything. Kevin caught her gaze, and she gave him a small nod. She had done it. She had saved him. The trial of Leonard Parker shook the entire city. One by one, more victims came forward, boys who had been too afraid to speak. The evidence was undeniable. The powerful millionaire who had once been untouchable was now nothing more than a criminal. He was sentenced to life in prison. Kevin, now free, was taken in by a kind social worker who helped him start a new life. With therapy and support, he began to heal. One day, as he walked past a newsstand, he saw a newspaper with Leonard's face on the front page. The monster behind the mask. How one brave boy brought down a tyrant. Kevin smiled. He had once been a boy with no home, no hope. But now he was something more. He was a survivor. And because of him, no other boy would ever suffer at the hands of Leonard Parker again. That brings us to the end of this video. I hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for watching.